Hey everybody. Today I'd like to talk about my experience at the No Kings rally on October 18th. I didn't go to the first No Kings rally in June, mainly because I chickened out, but I decided I would go to this one, and I'm really glad I did. It was really, really fun, and I'm definitely going to be going to other rallies in the future. This was the first protest that I've ever gone to, and it was a really fun and unique experience. I made a sign that said, "It's giving small dictator energy," and I wasn't really sure what to expect when I went, in terms of like the population and the types of people that would be there. I really haven't been a part of any like left-leaning or Democrat community. I mean, I've only known like evangelical communities, so I really wasn't sure what to expect. But the people there were super nice and there's a lot of older people, elderly people there. There's a lot of young people. I met several people that were around my age, and there were, kids there. I mean, it was just a really diverse group of people, and there was a lot of people. I read on the June rally or the June protest how many people attended in my area, and this time around it nearly doubled, and it was crazy, guys. It was just constant people yelling and screaming, and cars driving by, like, honking their horns like crazy. There was several cars that, kept, like, making circles in the area that we were protesting, just driving by and blaring their horn for 2 hours straight. The protest was also extremely playful, which I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, there were people dancing. We had, like, a little, band come out, like, some people had, like, some trumpets and some like musical equipment and we're playing like the Star Spangled Banner and stuff. And we had multiple people come out and those inflatable animal characters. I guess to support what's going on in Portland, and it's sort of become a cultural icon now to to wear those inflatables. But it was just super fun, and everyone was just having a good time. And, I thought I'd make that point. I mean, when I think of protest, I look at those like pictures of in those books and everyone's angry and yelling, but this was like super playful and fun. And I mean, people made their points, there's a lot of really strongly worded protest signs. But overall I mean, it, it was it was just really fun. There were also a lot of semi trucks that would drive by that I'm pretty sure were just driving to work. And, some of them would be honking the horn, supporting the protest, and some of them, wouldn't do anything. They were just driving to work. But early on in the protest, there was a really funny moment where there was this giant semi that was driving through the area, and all the protesters on the side were making that hand signal to like hold down the lever, to honk the horn. And everyone's like, "Oh, come on, do it, do it." And you could see the guy's face at the truck. He was just kind of like stoic, just trying to drive to work or do his job. And then you kind of see him reluctantly like pull the lever and honk the horn, and the crowd just went wild. It was really funny. And you could tell that the guy was probably a Republican. If he wasn't a Republican, he would have been blaring his horn like everyone else. But you kind of see him driving through, and everyone's kind of pressuring him to honk his horn, and he's just like, you know what? Yeah, F Donald Trump, and just pulls the horn, and it was really funny. I wore a American flag mask to the rally, and I did that for a few reasons. Firstly, I wanted to wear a mask just because I didn't want to be recognized there. My brothers I knew were going to be there, uh, protesting against the protesters, being counter protesters. I actually didn't see them there, but they told me afterwards that they went, and I guess owned the libs or whatever that means. Um, but I didn't want to be recognized at the rally. And secondly, I wanted to wear an American flag to show that just because you're, against Trump doesn't mean you're anti-America or anything like that. I would still consider myself a patriot, someone who still loves my country and loves the people in the country. And, I don't want the Republicans to, just co-opt or to just claim the flag as somehow the American flag is, the Republican flag. It's every American's flag. I wore sort of these baggy jeans just because that's what I had. And I just wore like a regular t-shirt, but I kind of presented myself in hindsight, I kind of realized that I presented myself sort of like a typical Republican. I had these sort of worker jeans on and American flag. And I think some of the protesters there were kind of skeptical when I kind of walked in, kind of wondering like who is this guy with like an American flag mask? I guess looks kind of scary, you know. And so it wasn't until I started, talking to people that people realized like, oh, okay, he's with us. He's not a counter protester or anything. So, I sort of looked like a Republican, and there I was at a No Kings rally protesting against Trump. And I think this sparked a funny interaction with a couple counter protesters that I engaged with. It was kind of hard finding a parking space where I went because there was thousands of people there. But I finally found a parking space, and I was walking to where the protest was. And on my way up there, there was two shirtless dudes in a rusty truck that pull up right next to me. I mean, they're just a few feet away, and they like roll down the window and they start pointing at me and go, F slur, F slur, F slur. I've been thinking about that because I was walking with like a group of people. Like there's a bunch of people that were walking and they sort of singled me out with that. And, I look like a Republican. I look like a conservative. And behind me was a lesbian couple. I mean, they very much looked like a lesbian couple. And the people in front of me were waving a trans flag. And there I was in the middle with an American flag, who very much looks like a conservative. And they decided to single me out and call me the F slur. I think they recognized that we had a similar upbringing. You see all these people that look like liberals that are waving flags that are associated with liberals, right? And then there's me, who very clearly looks like someone who's the very least familiar with Republican culture. And I think they knew that I was someone who defected from their side. And I think it's, a bit of a hit to their pride because there's sort of this mantra, at least in my experience growing up in conservative communities. There's sort of this mantra that our way of living and our way of thinking is untouchable and is, just elite to everyone else's ideology. And there's sort of this assumption that if you truly understand our way of life and truly understand our way of thinking, that there's no way an honest person could look at that and defect, or to look at the quote unquote whole picture and come away with the conclusion that the left side of politics is the correct side. And so it's a bit of a hit to their pride. I mean, I'm sort of making some assumptions about these guys, but just in general, you know, in my experience, there's an extra level of disdain for people who were Republicans that defected, because those two hecklers, I mean, they would have loved me for me to have, blue hair or to, if I was like a college age girl or college age woman, they hate women so much, like they would have loved that. I mean, 'cause they can just other me and sort of point at someone else who is of a different group and go, oh, those people are crazy. But when it's clear that I was on their side, I was on your side, And after looking at everything, I decided to leave. It's like an extra shot, an extra hit to your pride. I also have a suspicion that they are closeted gay men. And I know people like to throw that around a lot when, they talk about Republicans or especially Republicans in Congress, and they just assume, oh, well, if you're really anti-gay, then you must be gay. But there's actually some truth to that, to be honest. Um, First of all, there are two guys that are shirtless together. I mean, you can kind of just look at that and make some assumptions. But in my experience growing up in a super conservative church, all about purity culture and super against, what they would call sexual immorality, there were several closeted uh, closeted people. And outside of this conversation with my mom, a few weeks ago, but it's not a choice to be gay. No one just wakes up and decides that they want to be attracted to a certain gender. And so even in communities like a Christian conservative community that preaches consistently against homosexuality, you're still going to have people that are gay because, they can't help it. And so, in my experience in these really conservative areas, there was a few different, I guess, types of closeted gay boys, at least in my experience. There were those that had super low self-esteem and, were suicidal at times and were just really closeted. Um, and looking back, it was a privilege that they came out to me. I wish I had handled that situation differently. That was back when I was still very conservative and all that. But in church, there were these two, I guess, what you could say, bullies. They were, I guess, my bullies, and they bullied a lot of people. And well, they were secretly gay together. I remember one day. I mean, they were always very touchy with each other. Um, but people would play it off as, oh, they're just very close to each other. You know, they they'd sit on each other's lap, but I guess it was fine. I don't know. Looking back, it was pretty obvious. But one day I walk by and they're in a classroom and I see them kissing each other and I just kind of walk away and I'm like, oh, I learned something that I probably should not have learned. But they were super homophobic publicly, and they would call people the F slur, and they were really really mean to everybody. And eventually they grew up and they got married to women, of course, and they're both these conservative young adults that are trying to start a family. But I know their secret. Um, but just making the point that if you're you know that there is sort of a stereotype, if you will, of people who are really angry and vengeful against um, people who are gay. That there is at least a correlation, at least from anecdotal evidence, that a lot of those people that are really anti-gay are just projecting their own low self-esteem. And I mean, that's really all I have to say about the protest. I mean, if you haven't gone to one, I highly recommend you do. It was really, really fun. And, I'm very introverted. I don't usually go outside and do things like this very often. Um, but yeah, if I can have a great time, so can you. So anyway, that's all I have for today. Thanks for listening.